And good morning to 95.1 FM. Also our Facebook friends, our YouTube friends. And thanks for listening to us. This is a very special show. This is our last show for 2021. Today, we're going to be tackling legal issues of the day. And with my superstar panel with the great Milton Grimes from LA, who started the modern civil rights with the Rodney King case, and my crack shot research analyst, Vanita Banks, who's one of the top lawyers, masters in tax, and we're just grateful to have them today. But today also, we are dealing with legal issues of the day. And the biggest legal issue of the day, really, folks, is the pandemic. The Omicron virus is wreaking havoc, but it appears to be less deadly. And so today I'm bringing on an expert to start the show off, Dr. Mamadou, a board certified physician. He also is a military officer, and which is great to have Dr. Mamadou as our initial guest. Dr. Mamadou, how are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing good, sir. Good to see you.
Hey, Doc, under these circumstances, 2022, we're going to look like a third year of this disease process. What's going on with this Omicron virus?
So Omicron is a new strain that has multiple variants, spike proteins. Delta strain came in with about 17. This Omicron has about 50 with 36, at least on the spike protein. That is the one that binds to human cells to be able to replicate. And because of that, it has been determined to be very infectious, very contagious, and spread very quickly. And it's also the type of strain that replicates very quickly in the respiratory tract, upper respiratory, so that when you get Omicron, it's almost guaranteed that within 48 hours, you start showing symptoms, versus other people that Omicron, with Delta and the rest strain that were previously available, they don't cause symptoms that fast. So the problem with Omicron is that the two vaccines that we have gotten is not enough to neutralize Omicron, to avoid being hospitalized or having a severe case of the disease. So the only way now you can protect yourself is to get the booster. The booster is able to raise your antibody up to about 89–90% to be able to neutralize this virus. Without the booster, it's almost like you are 33%. So you have a chance of being admitted into the hospital if you get an Omicron virus.
Wow. Well, my guess, I'll first see whether Attorney Banks or Grimes have any questions. Counsel, you have any questions to Dr. Mamadou?
Yes, my question is, Doctor, that I've been hearing about two reports, the one coming out of South Africa, the other one coming out of the UK, I believe yesterday, on this issue of whether or not, we've heard pretty consistently that the Omicron virus is more highly transmissible, as you stated. And then the question was whether or not the disease or would be more severe. And we were initially hearing that the symptom would be less severe coming out of an initial report in South Africa, but then more recently heard that it's equally, the disease process equally as severe. Just wondering what your thoughts are on the severity of the of this variant when one is vaccinated and boosted.
So very quickly, thank you for that question. The issue of severity, you have to separate it into two. First, those that have vaccinated and those that are not vaccinated. Those people that are not vaccinated, their severity remains the same. If the virus results in pneumonia, your chances of getting a worst case of the infection is very high. And almost for what it has been established now, you have 10 times more chance of being admitted to the hospital if you are not vaccinated and you get whether it be Delta or Omicron. However, though, if you are vaccinated and you are boosted, the correct term, if you are boosted and you get Omicron, your antibodies will neutralize the virus that comes into your system you might still show some very mild symptoms such as runny nose, stuffy nose, body ache, but you will not be admitted into the hospital. So it's always good to understand when we talk about mild cases of this virus, we're not including people that are not boosted yet. Because if you are not boosted, you probably will still have a worst case of Omicron, whether or not it's more contagious, more virulent, or whatever it is. So that is why right now the study is still out there. I also want to add this, when the other strain came, a lot of the children were not getting affected as much as now, but Omicron is almost affecting children higher than the Delta strain, than the Alpha strain, and all other strains that we have dealt with.
Thank you.
Attorney Grimes, you have any question?
Got about 1,000 of them running through my mind. Seriously, quarantine protection for folks, protocol for folks and differently exposed for COVID positive person. I was just looking at a note that was passed to me, that's all. I don't fully understand the note. Doc, I gave you a hard time the first time I met you about taking the vaccine. You probably don't remember that. Because
I remember you, Mr. Grant, and I like you still.
and I'm vaccinated. I'm vaccinated. Miss
Praise
Banks,
God.
Miss Banks wore me down.
Yes.
But I'm concerned now with the protection one has. You've explained that if you're vaccinated, you get a lighter episode of the Omicron virus than if you're not vaccinated. Understood. But what do we do? Let's say a spouse or loved one has been exposed to the virus because they're a school teacher, and that person hasn't tested positive, but the class has been sent home for quarantine. That teacher is now assigned to another class to teach. That teacher is told they should be on quarantine, but that teacher is confused as to whether to go home and quarantine oneself in the bedroom with the family or go to separate living quarters. What do you advise for the protection of that person and the family?
Great, that's a good question also. Let me just make this clear. If you are boosted, okay, if you have received all your vaccination, you are boosted, and you have a breakthrough infection, meaning that you get exposed to Omicron, you may not be showing symptoms, but you can transmit the virus. You can still transmit the virus whether you are boosted or not. The only thing guaranteed is that your infection may not be as bad as that person that is not boosted. Your question is, if you are exposed and you are not showing symptoms, the recommendation is that you need to, if you are boosted, you don't need to isolate yourself. You don't need to go into 10 days isolation if you are boosted. You have to wait until you are showing symptoms, then you can isolate for 10 days if you are boosted. But if you are not boosted and you are not vaccinated, you are exposed, you need to stay wherever you are for about 7 to 10 days, the incubation period, to see if you are actually carrying the virus now. I can tell you, everybody exposed to Omicron, unless you are boosted, you have the vaccination, you will get Omicron. That is how contagious it is, because it's the very one that replicates faster in the upper respiratory tract. So once you breathe out Omicron. And the only protection is just this vaccine that will help you up to prevent you from being admitted to the hospital, showing severe case of the disease, and prevent death.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hey, Doc, there was something that was amazing that happened. We had the airline CEOs testify before the Senate this week, and the outgoing chairperson of American Airlines, he testified that he thought that you didn't need the mask anymore on airplanes, on the jet, based on the fact that the filtration system was so phenomenal until you wouldn't catch the virus. Then on Friday, he has the virus. The guy, I was thinking, man, how ironic that is. Now he gives sworn testimony to Congress and says that you don't need the mask, to be on the airline, and the Delta CEO said, "Oh no, we need to continue to wear the mask on the airline." And because one of my concern is that when I get on a flight anymore, is that when you sit down, when people passing by you, they come on the plane, they're coughing and stuff. Man, I hate that. But I still think that there's still the risk, regardless of what he was saying, and because there's evidence that he contracted the virus. I think that when people get on the plane, they need to keep their masks on as much as possible. What do you think?
Yeah, and let me also add this. Maybe you already know this, and Mr. Grant knows this too. If you're going to fly, do not fly with just the regular mask. You have to wear N95. Omicron, we only respect N95 in a very tight space. The N95 is the only guarantee for you not to get Omicron in a very tight space. The mask we are wearing now I don't see this mask preventing Omicron the way in which Omicron is penetrating human cells and stuff like that. So mask is still very important, not just for the for this contagious virus, also for flu and every other thing that is going around. There's also coronavirus that causes upper respiratory illness that is not even COVID-19 coronavirus. So there are still some other dangerous viruses out there that the mask is helping us to prevent. But if I were you, if I were anybody hearing me now, you are going to a very large family where everybody will be breathing, you're going to a very tight space, you have to use N95. If you don't use N95, then you can contract Omicron, and boosted or not, you probably could show some symptoms.
But why are they handing out and selling these ineffective masks? I mean, what's the purpose of selling the little blue mask?
Because the mask,
than you can the N95.
Yeah, because this mask can protect you when areas are better ventilated and you are not exposed to the higher dose of it. These are dose dependent also. That is why when you are going to be in a place where it's highly populated, everybody will be breathing, you don't know who has this virus, you got to use N95 in those closed spaces. It is recommended. But if you're in a place that is a little bit more ventilated, those regular masks that you see people wearing, they can help also. They can slow the spread of the virus. But if I'm flying now, I have been flying all this time wearing the regular mask. If I get into the plane now, I'm wearing N95 because of the Omicron strain.
Wow, that's important. Hey, Doc, there's another thing on a different direction on this issue. This Omicron was discovered by a scientist over in Africa. And as soon as he identified this threat, the United States government shut off air travel to about 7 African nations. And now, then it turns out they discovered that it was already in the United States, it's already in the other country, and they only blocked travel to South Africa and those 7 nations in Africa. I just thought that we overreacted in terms of, for future references, if a scientist identify a new threat of this, are we going to shut off communications to that country also? I was troubled by what they did.
Well, the truth of the matter is that South Africa has a very strong genomic surveillance engineering, and they are able to detect and sequence all these viruses and know what is prevalent in their country. And I thought that the response to them was a little bit reticent. I mean, they're able to catch this virus, and this virus goes everywhere. We should actually congratulate them instead of saying people from your country can no longer come here, because right now, the problem in Europe are not people from South Africa. And the problem in China, some of them didn't even come from South Africa. There is indigenous transmission among this population. So I agree with you that the response that we ought, not us here, but the nations took against South Africa, although they have quickly reversed it now. I see that Britain has reversed that decision, and most countries are reversing it because they know that they can't use banning people from different countries to control this virus. This virus is going to be, there's going to be another strain. So this virus is going to keep mutating until we send vaccines to everybody. The only solution to this problem is to make sure that everybody and all nations get the vaccine. Otherwise, if we don't distribute this vaccine to those people, it doesn't have to be Africa, everywhere, then there will continuously be a mutant gene that we have to hustle for like this and protect ourselves.
Okay, producer, let's go to the line to get one of our callers. They have a question about what we're discussing today. Hey, caller, you have a question for us today.
Hello, how you doing? Brother Nate, and thank you for taking my call, and definitely to your guest. Just one quick question, I guess, note in reaction, probably from a physician. I was reading an article at NPR yesterday about the Omicron variant, and the team of doctors in Botswana, Dr. if I'm pronouncing Siku Lili Moyo, and his team that found the variant, and then he was saddened by the banning travelers from Southern Africa. He said, we were saddened. For me, personally, I felt that after 2 years in the epidemic, clearly, as a global health community, we will be responding better and coordinating better. How do you reward the countries that alert you of a potential dangerous pathogen with travel bans? My country was put on the red list, and I didn't feel good about that. So what do you guys think about that from Dr. Moyo, who we want to congratulate? He's a fine, nice-looking gentleman, actually very, very clean-cut. We always see Anglo and European scientists with what's going on, but yet we have Dr. Moyo here, who should be highlighted and should be celebrated. Thank you for taking my call.
I appreciate that question. As you are aware, Omicron was first discovered in Botswana, November 11, and then again in South Africa in November 14. And what we do know now is that the African scientists do have the capabilities to do genomic surveillance and to be able to tell us the exact virus that is prevailing there. Whether or not they are not recognizing the African scientists the way they should be recognized, there's no way you can push them aside now, because they're the first person. Nobody told them how to sequence this stuff. They were the ones that were able to sequence this virus and told us exactly the virus that is prevailing in the South African nations. So I agree with you. The doctor from Botswana did a good job in combining with South African doctors to sequence this virus. And that is what is currently going on in Africa, that collaboration. And at some point, we don't need people to congratulate us. We just need to keep going. And that's what I think for the continent. Keep going, keep doing the right thing. At some point, history will have it that with some of these stuff, we were never helped. We did it ourselves, and that is what it is.
I think what this gentleman is saying, I'm gonna bluntly say, and that is there's a tendency not to recognize the geniusness and the science and the brilliance that exists in Africa, all parts, including South Africa. I saw a documentary on the Ebola outbreak and how that was shut down, controlled, and didn't spread all over the world that it had a serious potential of doing had it not been for this African doctor.
Yes, and there are many, many different other scientific breakthroughs that Africa have been able to control by themselves. Look at the COVID itself. Before the Delta as well as the Omicron, you can see the continent do not have the kind of deaths that we saw in Asia countries, European countries. That is not because they are not getting the virus. We have studied it and have seen how they control this virus. They have experience with these contagious viruses. You remember the Ebola, just like you said, they were able to contain it, and it didn't spread to all parts of Africa. Africa as a continent need to be congratulated, because the death in the whole continent cannot be compared to what we saw in other parts of the world. Africa is doing a good job. Again, like I said, we may not be congratulated, we may not be giving recognition, but we know that we know what we know, and that we're helping our people to advance.
It's kind of coincidental that this outbreak has occurred in South Africa when just a week or so before then, Africa was being praised for having the less infections than any other part of the world.
Yes,
per capita.
And the scientists are still trying to study that also. And if you go to some of these other African nations, they are actually controlling COVID the best way they can, and they have. And you understand that initially the whole world, including WHO, was worried about Africa, that Africa could be the place to watch because several people will die in Africa because they don't have good healthcare system and stuff like that. But the African leaders stood up and managed this thing very well, and I'm very proud of them.
Well,
Doctor,
thank you. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Doctor, how do you account for the fact that, actually I had two questions. One is to say, should we all cancel our travel plans for the holidays?
No.
And then there's a question related to N95s, and as much as they're really harder to obtain, and what about KN95s? One, should we all cancel our travel plans? And the whole question regarding N95s and KN95s. And then thirdly, how do you account for the fact, as we're talking about the brilliant doctors in Africa, that only 5% of citizens in Africa have been fully vaccinated?
Good. This is a good question. First of all, let me take the first question, which is, should we cancel our travel plan? If I'm immunocompromised and I'm vaccinated or boosted, I probably will not travel in this holiday. Use the word immunocompromised. You know what I mean by that? You're cancer patients, you are taking so many medications, and I will probably, and you are boosted, I will probably stay where I am. However, if you are not immunocompromised and you have taken your booster, I will travel with a great caution. You know, before when this virus first came, you wash your hands, you use sanitizer. With Omicron, you can use sanitizer all you want, you can wash your hands, do everything. This is very, very contagious. If by any chance you breathe it in by removing your mask wrongly or being in a very close environment where people are breathing and the virus is airborne, the chances of getting Omicron is very high. 5 times, 10 times chance of getting Omicron if you're exposed to it. So my advice for you, anybody, is that if you are immunocompromised, boosted or not, stay where you are for now. And if you are not immunocompromised and you are boosted, you can go home or still travel to meet loved ones, carry your N95, KN95 will do the job also, and avoid a large congregation.
Hey, there's one additional statistical thing that we need to point out that confirm what you're talking about, Dr. Mamadou. In the world now, there's 5.3 million people that have died from coronavirus and a little bit over 800,000 in the United States. Now, that's important because we're only 3% of the population. Before Joe Biden took office, the United States was 24% of all the people in the world that died from coronavirus. So our death numbers have dramatically went down in 2021. So it shows that this administration has done a fantastic job, because the death numbers in the United States, we went from like almost 25% now, and we're down to what amount to about 16%. And that's a dramatic decrease in death. And so I think that that's a testament to the vaccination process. What we're seeing now, all studies says that we have an outbreak of the virus death based upon the unvaccinated person. And I think that we're a living testament to that. So all the folks in this country are still alive. They could thank the fact that scientists have developed these wonderful vaccines to save our lives. So, well, I thank you for your contribution today, Doc. Do you have any closing comment?
Question, please, Nate. If I may, one.
Yes, go ahead.
Doc,
Yes.
How soon is the booster shot effective?
Say that again?
How soon does the booster shot take effect?
10 days.
10 days?
7 to 10 days.
Okay, thank you.
You start developing you start developing neutralizing antibodies. You need 2 weeks solid for you to be very okay, but from 7 to 10 days, your antibodies are already rising up against any spike protein that they don't recognize.
Doctor, could you speak to my question regarding the vaccination status across Africa?
Okay,
I've been
yes.
reading only 5%. Is that
yes,
true?
I'm so sorry. You know that these vaccines are different from nations to nations. You have the Cuba vaccine now. You have the Chinese vaccine. You have the Russia vaccine, which is increasing HIV in men. You have the Johnson & Johnson and Moderna and Pfizer. So Africa as a nation has been getting some of their vaccine through WHO, because as you are aware, there is no resident manufacturing company in Africa that is producing all these vaccines. So they have to get it from so many other places. And they are not all as economically capable as others. Some nations are richer than others. The truth of the matter is that I've also read that where vaccines are sent to them and the expiration date is so close that, the storage and the expiration date, you send a vaccine to a nation and it has 2 weeks expiration date. With all these conspiracy theories everywhere, you have to try to convince your people to take the vaccine. By the time you finish convincing people, the expiration date is already over. You have to throw away that vaccine. So Africa has the same struggle like this place with regards to people that are hesitant taking the vaccine because they think it's not the right thing for them. So quickly, vaccines are now going to Africa. It's just the problem is we need to make sure that we don't send to them the vaccines that will expire within 1 to 2 weeks. Secondly, we don't want to send them vaccines that are not actually doing this job. I want to be frank with you. Johnson & Johnson, Moderna, and Pfizer are some of the best vaccines, but Johnson & Johnson is not as good as Moderna and Pfizer against Omicron. So these are the issues that we're facing now, okay?
Any further question, counselors?
I just had one more question, and thank you so much, Doctor. How can the rapid test help? We're seeing a lot of data out here regarding and recommendations that we should be incorporating, home antigen tests as we're thinking about traveling for the holidays. What are your thoughts on the rapid antigen tests, which some of them indicate within minutes whether someone is contagious with COVID-19?
So I think everybody should have the 5-minute test at home, especially if you plan to travel. And it will help you and help anybody that you're going to make contact with. To answer your question, the rapid antigen test is very important. That just tests you right there, positive or negative. If you have the symptom, you test yourself, you are positive, you stay at home. You stay at home for 10 days. And like I said earlier, you can have the virus and not show symptoms, and you continue to shed it. So it is very important that if you start to have those symptoms, cold, body ache, stuffy nose, sore throat, and in this period of COVID, it's COVID until proven otherwise. You test yourself, you're positive, you stay at home, you cancel your trip. And that is why the rapid antigen test is very, very important. Again, not all virus symptoms are COVID. You find out that you test yourself sometimes is negative. It could be that what you have is still virus, but it's not the COVID strain.
Okay, any further question, Counselor?
How accurate is the rapid test?
Huh?
How accurate is that rapid test? Could it be in error quite frequently?
Well, the sensitivity, there is definitely, the rapid test is about 40% accurate, but at least it gives you an understanding, maybe you have this virus or not. It's not 100%. If you want to really get to the bottom of it, you have to go do the PCR test. The PCR test is the most accurate, is the one that is called nucleic acid amplification test. That is why it takes 30 minutes, because they will test for all the different proteins and stuff like that. So the rapid test just tests you positive or negative, but we captured it about 40% of the time, but miss out 60%.
Wow. Thank you very much. That clarifies that for me. So the PCR test. So the PCR test is where they stick it up your nose almost to your brain.
that is the one that goes. And you can say that it's done in different countries differently, but mostly it's the one that goes deep into your nostrils, and you almost like, did that thing enter my brain or not? You don't know sometimes.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, I hate that test, but
the blood test will come out soon. Everything is coming out rapidly. If you're listening to me now, it's good to have the rapid test at home. It's also good for the kids. If your kids start showing symptoms, you can quickly test them. And if they're positive, keep them at home.
Well, thank you very much, Doctor. And if anybody have any further questions, and what's your office number if they wanted to follow up on the testing?
Can I?
Yeah, it's 31. Yes, sir.
One last question, Nate.
Mr. Grimes, you have a question?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
So you suspect that a person may have been exposed to the virus. Does wearing the mask at home in daily contact with that person really prevent the Omicron virus from spreading, or we're just playing with ourselves when we do that?
Mr. Grimes, what you are saying, assuming your wife has Omicron or has the virus and she's quarantined in a room downstairs. Usually, if you have a basement, send them to the basement, or if you don't have a basement, keep them in a private room and they give them food as needed. And then you want to know if you can wear mask. Yes, wearing mask in the house will prevent you from getting the Omicron. Wearing mask
hasn't been tested, has not been tested positive.
But if you have not been tested positive, but you are exposed, I will wear mask. If you are exposed, until the person exposed.
Don't have been exposed to a student.
If you're exposed to a student and you are not, you are boosted, you don't have any problem. Just keep doing what you're doing. But if you are not boosted, and you stay at home and quarantine for 10 days because you are exposed, if you don't show any symptoms, you're free to go. But people around you should use discretion when they come into contact with you in the room where you are quarantined, i.e. wear mask. If you go into a room with somebody who is not showing symptoms but is under quarantine, you need to wear mask. The question is, what type of mask? If I'm at home, if I know you are quarantined in one of my rooms, I'm taking my N95 to come and say hello to you. If I need to check on you, I will wear an N95 because if it's Omicron, you're going to get it. You know, that's just the bottom line.
Okay, thank you. I'll send you your check.
Oh yeah, please, quickly.
Hey, Doctor, what's your office phone number for people that have follow-up question or want to be tested or otherwise? What's your follow-up, your office number?
So they can call me at 317-493-1053.
And what are your office hours?
8:30 to 5 p.m. every day.
Okay, so there you have Dr. Mamadou, board certified internal medicine, military officer. Thank you, Doc, for sharing this information with us today. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Nice talking to you again. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Okay, bye.
Okay, now switching gears. The trial this week was the Kim Potter trial, who shot and killed Dante Wright. And I pulled the cross-examination. I watched part of the trial, and I thought that Kim Potter was winning the trial. The part I watched, I saw an expert say that the police officer say her life was in danger of another officer, and deadly force was justified based on the circumstances. But then she got on the stand to testify, and here's what happened real quickly. Cross-examination said that Wright had not threatened the officer, and here's some of the key questions. You never saw a gun? Potter said, no. He never threw a punch. No. He never kicked anyone. No. He never said, I'm going to kill you. No. He never said, I'm going to shoot you. No. He never said there's a gun in the car. No. And then how does the gun come out of the holster? It would rock forward. How do you pull with your hand out of your holster? It would rock forward and you pull it out. And the taser, on the other hand, you would press the button, rock it back, and pull it out, correct? Yes. So they asked all these questions during cross-examination, and Potter admitted to committing the crime and all the key elements of the crime. I was stunned because I thought that this witness, whether I do a lot of trial work, but it seemed like to me, counsel, she was ill prepared for cross-examination because she admitted to everything, to all the essential elements of the crime. And then it seemed like to me that the defense entire strategy was to put on the stand and have her cry for 30 minutes and get what we call jury nullification. What do you think?
You asked me?
Yes.
I watched a small a small part of her testimony, Nate. And I can say that, generally speaking, all of us will make a mistake when we're cross-examination in one phase or another. It may not be a big one, maybe a small one, but you can only prepare so much for cross-examination. That's why they call it cross, And I used to think I was a swashbuckler at cross. Anyway, I'll get to that at another day. But cross-examination is for that purpose, to open you up. That's why people do not take the stand. from what I saw of her, she was straightforward. She looked at the camera. She was composed. She's a 25-year officer or more. She's never fired her weapon in that whole 25 years. She's been a training officer. This was a sudden change in the circumstances that all of us respond differently to. And so in this case, they had this young man semi-surrounded. He was asked to get out of the car, and I may be wrong about that, but my point is this. She said, I think the facts are, whether she made a mistake and testified about it or not, I understand it was a bench conference and then I had to leave to go to court, but this was a new taser. Her original taser was one color and operated one way, and this new taser that she'd had for 2 weeks operated another way. I was one time thinking, well, this is her taser. She's practiced with it. She knows it. She knows the feel of it. It's different from a gun. But if this is a new taser, it takes a while to get used to. She should have known that her taser is supposed to be on the left as opposed to the right. But she automatically is trained in danger to go for her weapon. So this, hey guys, I'm not taking sides. I'm just looking at what the facts I know. In this case, regrettably so, the young man decided to run, and he's running now with the car, and he accelerates the car suddenly, and anybody around, you or I, anyone else, whether we're in the rear of the car, the side of the car, the front of the car, wherever, we're going to react. She reacted in a self-preservation way, or to preserve fellow officers as she's trained, and bam! It ain't my taser, it's my gun. I intended to do one thing, but the suddenness of this caused me to go for my gun. And immediately she goes into, not denial, she goes into regret, immediately self-regret, a loud voice, self-regret, oh my God, what have I done? She's got to be a pretty good Hollywood actor to follow that up with that reaction. But I think it's going to be hard for the prosecution to get away from the young man, regardless of whether it was a legal stop, justifiable stop, or whatever you want to call it, that the young man accelerated the situation and caused this to happen. And so there's going to be some responsibility that they're going to be looking at. If that's what I believe. So if we're going to analyze this thing, we should be fair about it, black or white. And I regret this young African-American kid losing his life for some dumb shoot like this. But brothers and sisters, I think that the law has to be fair to everybody if we're going to change this system and expect fairness for ourselves and look at these facts. And I think these facts do not look in favor of the prosecution.
Attorney Banks? While we're getting her on the line, the issue of qualified immunity come into play. With the current Supreme Court ruling on qualified immunity, when he accelerated the car, that would justify the use of deadly force. So when I was watching the trial, there's been a lot of cases in which I've seen the significant abuse of power by police officers. But this case here was one of the cases that I had some ambiguity in terms of how the consequence would be. And reason being is that you're absolutely correct, is that when you watch the entire episode, the officers, I've seen officers be very abusive, but you know, the issue came to play is that he had some expired plates, which is not a ground to kill anybody. And what drew her suspicion was apparently he had the, what do you call it?
Incense.
The incense, right? And which is code for marijuana, I guess. I guess that's educational too for a lot of young folks that are listening. The incense in the car, I guess, gives some of us a probable cause to think that you've been smoking marijuana or something or otherwise. And so that was one of the things I thought was critical. The third thing is that the stop did not result in abusive language. or nor excessive force at the outset of it. And I watched the communication, and the officer weren't being overtly aggressive. And so the thing that bothered me about this whole case is that when he decided to accelerate, I was thinking to myself, this is going to be a bad case for a lot of civil rights advocates, because on the one hand, you can't disobey a lawful command of a police officer. And on the other hand, you shouldn't be shooting a person for a simple traffic stop. So it's a tough case. It's one of those cases whereby if it was a civil trial, you probably lose that half the time. I thought before she testified, I actually thought that she would be acquitted. But then she testified, and I thought that her testimony was more damning. But then in her testimony, it comes out that her son is in the Marine. Other son is a college. So it's an all-American type family. I thought that she could have got the human part of her testimony out through her husband, who's been in the courtroom, and not put her on the stand. I don't know. I mean, I just thought that was a mistake for her testifying, Milton.
You may have made a mistake in it, Nate, but not putting her on the stand. I'm an advocate. I know that a jury sitting here want to know, why did you do what you did? And nobody can answer that question but you. And I've kept many clients, defendants in criminal cases seated and taking the fifth and not testifying, and wiggle my way around getting something in that they would say or do. However, sometimes you can't get away from that. You just got to face the music, and you got to be prepared. And if you make a slip, you got to come back and say, I made a mistake in that. Somehow or another to come out, well, you said 10 times before that it was a red light, right? So why did you say it's a green light now? I'm nervous, I'm scared, and then you got to deal with that correction. You follow me? And that's how life is. We're not perfect when we get on that stand. So we got to allow for that human frailty. So I didn't see her examination, but just analyzing it, I saw some of her examination. I didn't see that mistake that you putting your finger on, but we got to allow for, damn kid. And I've done those civil rights cases where a young man is taken off in the car and hit the officer. The officer claimed he had a scratch on his hand, and he went pop, 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 shot him in the back of the head. The car goes 2 blocks and crash. Now we have a policy out here in most departments, definitely in the sheriff's department, that if you're not in front of the car and you're not in danger, you're not supposed to place yourself in that position. But you can't stop an officer from going up to cite someone, given a ticket. They got to get close. And now you got a different circumstance. If the person take off suddenly, you think he's going to run over you or someone else, however you can think that and it's rational, they're going to get qualified immunity.
I agree. Attorney Banks?
I think if there was ever a case for a police officer to take the stand, that this was the case, and that she did remarkably well. Typically, when officers take the stand, they will defend their actions. As you said, Attorney Lee, she didn't disagree. She admitted that she made a mistake. And she said, I'm sorry that I made this mistake. She was contrite. Immediately after the tragic incident, as you said, Attorney Grimes, she falls to the ground. She's sobbing. She's inconsolable, following using her gun to kill Mr. Wright as opposed to her taser. I think that in this case, it was a calculated decision, and I believe the right one, to have her take the stand. And we'll see how much sympathy that particular decision will have on the jury's deliberations.
I have a friend he's a friend, John Barnett, who represented one of the cops in the Rodney King case. And he does defense work for police officers. And we did a seminar together once. And he turned to me during his presentation and he said, Milton, I'm going to make an admission in front of all of these lawyers that when you come to court and you represent a defendant, your defendant generally is presumed guilty, no matter if he's black or white or Chicano or Latino. He's presumed guilty because he's been accused, he's being prosecuted by the government. He must be guilty. When I go to court and represent a police officer, he's presumed innocent, and the government has to overcome that innocence. So she is presumed innocent, which the law requires, quite differently from most criminal defendants. So I think that presumption of innocence is going to stand for her, no matter how much heat is on this case, because that's the law. And if she has a reasonable, I don't want to say excuse, if she has a reasonable story as to why she pulled that gun instead of her taser, they should, if one interpretation of the evidence points to guilt and another one points to innocence, she must be given the benefit of the doubt, and the jury take that interpretation that points to innocence. That's the law.
Okay, one quick caller, and then we'll get back to it. Caller, you have a question or comment for us today?
Hey, how's it going?
Great.
You know, it amazes me how is it that an instructor, and that's the first time she fired her gun. It's too many times that we feel for these people that so-called accidentally murder somebody. She need to go to jail for life. I don't care how she cried, this and that. There's too many of us getting killed because people are accidentally letting their guns go off, and they instructors. I don't understand. How's she an instructor and never shot a gun? Fact check me and check it out. Thank you.
Well, law doesn't agree with you, though. And I understand your reaction, your feelings about that, because sometimes guns do go off accidentally. I've had it to happen to me in my life experience, and that happens. And accidents do happen. And you're not strict liability. That's what I wanted to call it. The term strict liability. If you cause the injury, you're responsible. No matter if you were unconscious at the time, no matter if you got hit in the head and you're unconscious, literally, and you pick up a gun and shoot somebody. You killed them, but you weren't conscious of it. So the law protects you. So the law protects you also for accidents the same way. So you may not like the result of what the act was, but we got to look at the act, sir, and decide whether or not there's sufficient reason to believe there was an intent, or was there gross negligence, or just what caused the death of an individual. That's just the law, bro.
One final comment on this. The supervisor said that she acted in compliance with police policies and procedure, and that it would allow the use of deadly force because the other officer's life was in danger when he was pulling away, and he could have caused his injury or death. And so this could be a tough case either way. I watched it, and I thought that prior to her testifying, I thought that she would be acquitted. And I felt sorry for the young man, and I've sued a lot of police officers, but this case here was just one of the close type cases that I've seen. We had a situation like this happen during the pandemic with a young man here in Annapolis. He was driving, and an officer ended up killing him. It was very unfortunate, but when I saw the facts of it, I say, well, that officer is going to be protected by qualified immunity in a civil case. And that was a problem with this case, I thought that once, because a car itself can be a deadly weapon. We know that. We see how cars are being used to kill people. And so that was my thought. Any comments on that, Attorney Banks?
Well, during her 26 years of service, she had received a substantial amount of training related to tasers. And there was testimony, as you know, where they showed you, the two different weapons, and that, the taser is usually placed on your less dominant side as opposed to your gun on your right side. And so, again, the question is whether or not her actions were criminally negligent because regardless of whether or not she intended to pull her gun, her actions were so grossly negligent and incompetent that they resulted in this death. What do you think?
Attorney Grimes, 1 minute response.
I think every moment is judged with its own facts. And in this particular moment, things seem to have been going along okay, as you've indicated. There was no excessive force, there was no abusive language, there was no roughing up anyone. It was just going along as a stop is supposed to under these circumstances, whether it was justified stop or not. And then suddenly he created an escalation of the situation. And I think that's what you got to come back to is, was it reasonable in that situation for her to fear her life or the life of another person, and for her to go for the taser? And if she went for the taser but grabbed the gun, is that something that can be understood? And I haven't kept up with all of the details of this case, but I say the law allows for that. And if she meets that threshold of showing she acted reasonable and under the pressure and the weight of the circumstances, she just made a mistake.
Yeah, also to our caller, one thing that you need to know, my law firm over the years represented a lot of officers, but one thing that I learned, most of the officers never fired their weapons during a line of duty. Most of the time, the officers that I represented, they de-escalate the situation and did not lead to a shooting. And so it's not unusual for a police officer to be in the department and not actually use their gun. I recently took an officer deposition who had ran over and killed a young man. And in his 20 plus years on the job, he had never fired his weapon at anyone. So, so the point that the person never shot anyone or fired a weapon at anyone, I don't think that's by itself unusual. I think that's a good thing. That tells me that police officers have good de-escalation skills, because a lot of times situations escalate and lead to fatality. But nevertheless, though, I'd like to thank each and every one of you for listening to our show. Because of the Christmas holiday and New Year holiday, we're going to be off until the first Saturday in January after the New Year's. I thank you for supporting our show throughout the years. And I'd like to take this opportunity to tell you that have a happy Christmas and New Year. Also, don't forget what Dr. Mamadou said, protect yourself when you travel. Make sure you have masks. He recommends N95 masks. And I agree that you have to do everything possible. But life goes on. So we're still going to travel. We're still going to do things. And but you need to protect yourself. I'd like to thank our special guests for all their great contributions during the year. And thank you. And have a blessed holiday and Happy New Year.
Thank you, Nick.
Goodbye.
Happy holidays, everyone. Thank you, Attorney Lee and Grimes.
Thank you, Vanita.